Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. This is kind of a weird cultural situation. How would you like to learn about the phenomenological approach to cultural adaptation? Nice. You're looking a little anxious. Let's take a plunge into the anxiety uncertainty model of intercultural interactions. Whew, awesome stuff. Let's do it. Ow! In our daily life, we can easily overlook how much of a role that our culture can play in shaping our assumptions about the most seemingly mundane things. A phenomenological approach to cultural adaptation emphasizes the need for us to continually examine and re-examine our biases and prepositions. According to Martin and Nakayama, when this approach is applied to the experience of migrant groups, it can explain how members of these groups experience and make sense of the adaptation process. Let's focus on an intercultural interaction that illustrates the first stage of cultural adaptation within this framework. Let me set the scene. I'm a member of the SEU Swim Club, and one of the biggest draws of this fine organization is our regular team dinners at some of the finest local eateries in Santa Clara. 2 years ago, we decided to eat at everyone's favorite Middle Eastern fast food restaurant, Falafel Drive-In. While we were dining there, I found out that a friend of mine, Randy, an international student from China, had never had hummus before. At the end of the dinner, I bought some pita and hummus to let him try some. As soon as my friend tasted the hummus, he grimaced and said that it had far too much Mexican spice for him. He had assumed that we were eating at a Mexican restaurant because he had heard the kitchen staff speak Spanish and had seen that they were Latino.
Yeah. So I thought I was eating Mexican food, and then I'm not very used to the taste. So it's like, oh man, I just can't eat Mexican food. And then my friend told me that's not Mexican food. So yeah, it changed my my view on the food for sure. I feel like it kind of changed my opinion on food, just because I did have the stereotype that if there's a certain type of food that I don't like, I will not try it at all. But maybe after this event, I would at least have a little bit before I judge it. So I think it's a positive influence for sure.
The phenomenological approach postulates that the first stage of cultural adaptation is taking things for granted. My friend felt as if he was familiar enough with Mexican cuisine to identify Falafel Drive-In as a Mexican restaurant. However, he was forced to reconsider the way he perceived this new food after discovering that it was not Mexican. In Fabio Periscoli's Savoring Semiotics, Food and Intercultural Communication, the point is made that a heightened sense of our culinary background is activated only when we face something completely different, for instance, a dish from an unfamiliar immigrant community. When examined through the lens of the phenomenological model, trying a new cuisine can be an exercise in sense-making, an effort to determine what boundaries separate the characters of one's cultural background from that of another.
Randy has always been extremely comfortable with asking his American friends about whether he is using slang correctly or what exactly certain American cultural practices entail. This openness has eased his efforts to adapt to American culture. According to a New Zealand-based survey of Chinese international students, Chinese international students with no host national friends would, in the long term, be less likely to adapt well social-culturally. Randy can more easily overcome the first stage of the phenomenological approach because of his willingness to boldly explore American culture with the backing of strong social networks here at Santa Clara University. His open approach to assimilating to and learning about American culture and customs also illustrate the low level of ethnocentrism he holds. William Sumner defined ethnocentrism in 1906 as the technical name for this view of things in which one's own group is the center of everything and that all others are scaled and rated with reference to it. Randy's low ethnocentrism allows for comfortable intercultural interactions, specifically his interaction with food. Had he demonstrated a higher level of ethnocentrism, he would hold less certainty during his intercultural interactions. Goody-Kunst's anxiety uncertainty model found that high levels of uncertainty exist in cross-cultural encounters, especially when cultural variability is high. Simply put, the greater the perceived differences between cultures, the less a communicator will be able to predict about the behaviors of the other party, and therefore be less likely to engage in intercultural interactions. These perceived differences between cultures are influenced by an individual's ethnocentricity.
So that wraps up my lesson for the day. Now tell me what you learned.
When we encounter unfamiliar intercultural experiences, we all have preconceived notions about how these interactions will entail. About what these interactions will entail. Dealing with these assumptions and overcoming our anxieties are a part of this process. Letting go of our ethnocentrism can be difficult, but tasting the hummus at the end of the day is a signal of our success in navigating new cross-cultural exchanges.
Beautiful. The apprentice has become the master.